Hey guys, welcome to what I think is going to be a pretty fast-paced 30 minutes. I actually have a clock set, so I don't take advantage of your time. But I want to thank you for being here, and I want to go through 6 of what I think are the most essential steps to achieving that dream physique, the body you've always wanted, losing weight permanently. That's the problem we have in our country and maybe the world at large, is just when we get to that final point of having lost weight and feeling good, we let it creep back on. That's something that's just been plaguing us forever. Matter of fact, more than 95% of people who lose weight gain it all back within 2 years. So just very briefly, in case you don't know who I am, my name is Joe Klemczewski. I founded the Diet Doc more than 20 years ago. Now we've got about 125, 150 locations around the world. And this is a way, us producing this curriculum, to help our program owners around the world reach their clients, reach their communities, and really have a bigger impact than I think we've ever had. So let me explain just a little bit about our premise, and then I'll get into these 6 steps. Again, we create curriculum for program owners all over the place. I just hung up. I was on a Skype session doing a workshop with one of our owners in Tasmania. This morning we had a new owner come on board and begin training in South Africa. Just in the last couple of weeks, we started new owners in Indianapolis, Indiana, not too far away from me, and also in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. We have a lot of owners on the East Coast. And we've been doing this long enough that we have a ton of data on what works and what doesn't. But 2 things have never changed from when I started this company. Number 1, you have to have the scientific premise to do things right without fads and gimmicks. It has to be sustainable. And for that, we have to know some things about metabolic science. So I'm going to go over that here tonight. The second thing is service. You have to have the ability to be checked and supported and monitored, and that's easier than ever now. We can be doing this with videos and that kind of thing. So we're at, I think, a perfect time to make the biggest impact and help people really live the kind of lives they want. So a lot of things to go over, but I want you to get out a pen and paper if you don't have it, because I want to talk about 6 essential points, but we're breaking them up into 2 groups of 3. So the first group is structure. The second group is flexibility. And I've talked about this for a long time, and last year in kind of a blog series, I just started using that term, structured flexibility, because a lot of people have abused that term flexibility, and they're starting to make it mean, you know, eat whatever you want, and as long as it fits calorically, it's okay. And nothing could be further from the truth. You guys intuitively know that. There are foods that are quality and health building, and there are foods that are not. And of course, we can indulge in small amounts of some of those foods over here, and that's fine. But how do we find that balance between structure and flexibility? That's what we're going to cover tonight. So the first thing you need to know about structure is we all have a unique metabolism. We all have a genetic structure, just like my hair is brown, my eyes are brown, that kind of thing, my height is this. Those things just don't change, right? That's genetic DNA. Metabolism is quite similar. So you might know from the time you were a child, maybe, of course we shift as we're going through puberty and then through other stages in life as we get to, you know, menopause and andropause and things like that. There are slight changes where we are in that phase of a certain time of life, but in general, if you have a body type that has a very fast metabolism or a very slow metabolism, that's just never going to change. A lot of that is hormonally based, and understanding what's right for you, the kind of diet that's right for you, is really imperative. And that can be as easy as just experimenting and making some notes and so forth. That's really what the scientific method is, which I'm going to talk about as well. But we have to understand metabolic capacity. And you hear a lot of misinformation bantered around the internet and in different books about, you know, false highs where people put ceilings or basement levels on things where they say you should never eat below this, you should always be here. That's just not true. I have personal clients right now who are eating as high as 6,000 calories a day, and I have clients as low as 800 to 1,000 calories a day. Of course, the bottom level might be hypothyroid, they're struggling, they've always had a slower metabolism, might be a little sedentary, and that's just what their body needs. Obviously, I could not put them up to that higher level and expect them to achieve the same results. So I'm not going to talk a lot about those specifics, macronutrients like protein, carbs, and fats and so forth. We just don't have a lot of time in this video for that, but we do have some curriculum coming up that will go into all of that detail. The first point I want to make under structure is we really do have to understand what our metabolic capacity is. And I recently did an experiment where I checked that on myself. You can go to calculators and find these things, and those algorithms might work, but there are a lot of assumptions made. You can even use a metabolic cart, you can do hydrostatic weighing, and all of those things can get you part of the way. But I'm telling you, the best way for you to decide or discover what your metabolism is capable of is just checking it yourself. It's just like how you would find out how many miles per gallon your car gets. You load it up with gasoline, it's full, and then you see how many miles you go, you fill it up, and you say, this is how many miles I went, this is how many gallons it took. We do the same thing with calories. So I have not tracked my food in about 10 years. I used to be a professional bodybuilder. I've helped coach hundreds and hundreds of bodybuilders and athletes to professional status, and that was a really fun thing in my 20s and 30s. And I just haven't done that in 10 years. Once I retired, it just wasn't important to me. Because of what I knew, I know enough about nutrition and physiology, I was able to maintain my body weight within a 5-pound range for 10 years without tracking my food. But I spent years and years and years tracking and discovering things about my body so I could get to that point. Well, a couple years ago, I had a few injuries, and it was really tough to come over, to get over those injuries, and so my strength and so forth was suffering, and I was really trying hard to get back up to a level that I'd be happy with. And I decided, just kind of like the good old days in my bodybuilding and powerlifting life, I just really needed to allow myself to eat a little more food, gain a little weight, and kind of give that turbo boost to my strength performance. And it worked. I spent 2 years very intentionally gaining about 15 pounds, and now I'm at a point where my strength is back, I feel better, and now I'm ready to take off a few pounds of body fat. So I started tracking my food, first time in 10 years, and I was able to discover just through tracking that intuitively, as I was recording my protein, carbs, and fat, I was eating about 2,300 calories a day, and over the course of 6 weeks, my body weight changed less than a pound. So very negligible. You could say that was a little bit of a calorie loss, but almost total neutral. And so I can say functionally, my functional metabolic rate is about 2,300 calories. Now my basal metabolic rate, if I stopped doing any activity at all, would be lower. But I'm training hard, I'm doing some things in the gym, and so that puts me about 2,300 calories. Now I have a baseline. If I really want to start losing some body fat, excuse me, I would have to drop my calories in a very systematic, good way. What do I do with my protein, my carbs, and my fat? That's all part of metabolism. But what I want to talk about, excuse me, got to stay hydrated. That's important in nutrition too. But the second part under structure, so you guys have structure and flexibility as 2 points in your outline here. The first part is metabolism under structure. The second point, subpoint, would be metabolic positioning. How do I know if my goal is to burn body fat? I've got enough food to maintain my lean body mass. I've got enough food to make sure my metabolism is staying strong, because all of that is very important. It's very critical, actually. So how am I going to know? Well, in all of the discussion of low-carb diets versus low-fat diets or balanced diets, all of these things, this is stuff that's been studied for a long time. Matter of fact, I just did a year-long total literature review, as much as I could find on the current research, to really look at all of the data that's been out in the last 10 years. And really not a lot has changed, but they're getting a little bit more specific, a lot more studies, a lot more exercise science labs and students are fine-tuning some of the really nuanced parts of nutrition, and it's pretty exciting. There's some really neat stuff you can learn. But something that hasn't changed is the fact that we need a certain amount of carbohydrates to maintain lean body mass. We need a certain amount of carbohydrates to maintain our energy, maintain our metabolism. But at the same time, that sword cuts both ways because too much carbohydrate and we can't lose body fat. So of all of these substrates our body can use as energy, carbohydrates, fat, and protein, we really have two sets of each. We have carbs we consume, but then we have stored carbs in our body, our muscle tissue, our liver, stored carbohydrates. There is blood sugar there. So that's the most immediate energy that we can use that's internal. So carbs we eat, and then stored carbs. Then of course we have fat that we can consume, and then we have stored body fat. We also have protein we can consume, and we have amino acids stored in our lean body mass and in some other places, like again the liver and so forth. So we really have those two groups of three sources of energy that we can draw from, and our body prefers carbohydrates. In the presence of glucose, our body's always going to use that. We've just simply evolved to use the fastest, most energy-producing, immediate source of energy possible, and that is carbohydrate. So if I'm consistently overeating carbohydrates, then my body is storing carbs. I eat too much carbohydrate, I use what my body can use at that moment, then I store the rest as glycogen in my liver, muscle tissue, etc. Then some of it can be stored as body fat very easily. Then we have body fat itself, or I should say fat that we can consume. When we consume more fat than we need, it almost immediately all gets stored as fat. Whereas carbohydrates, I mentioned, can get easily stored as fat if we consume too much. Our body produces insulin in our pancreas, and then it converts it to body fat. Fat from diet in to stored, there's really no process. It's just taken in and stored. That's why the thermic potential of fat is rated at about 3%, whereas the thermic potential of protein is about 30%, and carbs can range based on quality and complexity. So we really do ourselves a favor if we're trying to lose body fat by bringing fat intake down enough so that we can focus more on carbohydrates. We need a certain amount of carbs, as I said, to keep metabolism high, but we have to manage them so that we're just not going up and down between storage and loss, storage and loss. So in the term metabolic positioning, this is what I mean. If I bring my carbohydrates down to a level that my body can manage easily and I'm not over consuming carbs, then at each meal, I'm not storing extra energy. But in between meals, once my body has used those carbohydrates, I can then go into body fat stores. But first, as I said, we have stored carbohydrates to get through. So that's kind of a tease. That body fat is there, but we're not quite getting to it yet. It takes a couple of days to utilize or deplete all of the stored carbohydrate in our body. So we've got to get there first. We've got to go from managing our carb intake and our overall calorie strategy to make sure we're tapping into body fat stores between meals. Then it takes 2 or 3 days to finally get to stored body fat. And if you stay in that metabolic position, you will start using body fat as a higher percent of energy consistently. Now, this is the problem. Most of the time when we get there, we don't even know it's happening. We don't know this whole process exists. And so hey, it's Friday night, I'm gonna go get some beer and pizza, and we overconsume carbohydrates. We store carbohydrates internally, probably creating some new body fat, and then we're all the way back to the starting point. One of the best examples I have of this is a client one time who came to me and he said, "Hey man, I knew we were gonna get started today, so I spent all last week just kind of cleaning up my diet, getting ready, and I lost 10 pounds last week." So I said, "Well, fantastic. All this stuff I just explained to you about metabolic positioning, you're already there. Now we're in full body fat burning mode, and it's over, game over. You're gonna win this thing." And he said, "Well, not so fast." So I did that, but then I knew I was coming here, so I thought, man, as just kind of one last hurrah, I would go out with my friends, and he ate like a large pizza and drank a couple pitchers of beer, and he said, "I lost 10 pounds, and then I gained every single pound back. I'm sitting here right now at the exact same weight." And I said, "Okay, first of all, let's dissect this a little bit. So you lost a lot of stored carbohydrates or used a lot of stored carbs, which releases a lot of water, 3 times your carbohydrate weight in water, and you lost some body fat. And so you definitely refilled your carbohydrate levels, your glycogen levels internally, probably regained a little body fat. But that first initial loss and that regain was substantially stored carbohydrate and water. So that was a good trial run, but that's exactly why most of us have a problem with consistency and not just driving through 50, 75, 100 pounds lost and keeping it off. If you get into that metabolic position where you're burning body fat at the most efficient pace, you can stay there with some good, moderate changes and adjustments and fine-tuning, but you can stay there and lose body fat up to 50% faster. Excuse me. I get too excited. I talk too fast. Gonna wear myself out. So those are the first 2 things to understand, is that we all have that genetic metabolism. We have the metabolic position that we need to get into. Then we have to break all that down into meal planning. So I didn't plan these to be alliterations, but they just kind of worked out that way. So you've got metabolism, metabolic positioning, and meal planning. The meal planning is simply saying, okay, I know what my metabolic rate is or what it's capable of, so I know what my macronutrient ranges are going to be. I pushed myself into that metabolic position to start burning body fat faster. Now let's start working on meal planning. Maybe you just want to eat 3 solid meals a day and a pre-workout snack. That's kind of an in thing with the craze of intermittent fasting, is moving away from grazing and 6, 7 meals a day, that kind of thing, back into a little bit bigger meals, a little bit more strategic in timing. And both of those can work. I will tell you, in some of the literature review I did, when you get up to about 2 to 3 meals and then you go all the way to about 6 or 7 meals, there's just no difference. So we'll just get that out of the way now. You can choose because you like 3 or 4 meals a day, or 5 or 6 or 7, totally fine. Statistically, 0 difference if the calories are the same. But you might feel a little better one way or the other. It might fit your social schedule a little better, might fit your hunger patterns a little differently and a little better. So that's where meal planning really does come into play. You can decide how to format your day and experiment a little bit and do really well. Discover what works for you. So we're looking for that high structure. There is a lot of science behind metabolism and metabolic science. There's a lot of science behind metabolic positioning and all those processes I just talked about. There's a lot of science and structure behind how you can create meal planning and see if it affects you differently. So those are very structural components. I want to move on to the flexibility part. So this is that second group of 3. And the first one starts with the outlook of sustainability. If I'm going to do this forever, can I just stay on a diet? Absolutely not. I have to be able to eat in restaurants, eat the foods I like, be able to have some flexibility, and do well. Do well forever by managing something. I mentioned that I maintained my weight within a 5-pound range for about 10 years, and it just wasn't difficult because I know what my body needs. I've spent years and years not only just studying this, but experiencing it in my own body. So that's where sustainability comes in. You have to know that you have the freedom to do a lot of different things, but as long as you know what your body needs, what your metabolism requires, how metabolic positioning works, you can do this. It's very simple. So start with that goal in mind, sustainability. Let's work on moving from structure to flexibility and flow that through a process. It's really no different than learning anything else in life. I'm sure most of you spent many years in school, and you go to class on the first day and you get a syllabus and you go through all kinds of steps with homework and testing and so forth, and it's a process. You don't just get it all in one shot. And this is the same thing. You're going to have some experiential learning to do. Hopefully you'll get some guidance through good information and so forth, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this, so we can help with content and so forth. But start with sustainability in mind. That's really important. The next thing, and I've touched on this already a couple times, is the scientific method. Throughout this entire process, you have to realize that you are engaged in a very specific scientific process, and you are the experiment. So the way the scientific method is somebody first makes an observation and says, hey, what if we do this? What'll happen? And that's what you're doing with any kind of a diet change. I'm going to make this change, then I have to observe what happens. I have to measure it. So just like I did, I measured my results for 6 weeks. And I wasn't necessarily trying to lose, I was trying to give my body what I needed to make sure I could regain strength and lean body mass I had lost a little bit and all that. But really, I was kind of baselining myself to find out what my metabolism is. Now I can make changes. So that's the next step in the scientific method. It's for you to say, okay, I've created this hypothesis. I want to lose weight. Here's how I'm going to do it. I want to achieve better health. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's my plan. Now I'm going to execute it, and I'm going to observe exactly what's happening, and then I can fine tune. I can say, here are the results of my data, and hopefully we have a lot of data points. You've been weighing consistently, you've been tracking your food, you've been collecting all that objective, accurate information. Now you can move on to the next step, which is to say, okay, I need to fine tune this. I need to create another change if that's necessary, and then look at what happens and record that and observe and interpret those results. That's key. Interpreting what's happening. Am I losing weight too fast? Am I losing weight too slow? Is this healthy? Am I doing things at a good pace? So that's how the scientific method works. In this portion called flexibility, the second group of 3 points, you're starting with that premise of sustainability, and then you're going through that process of really exploring scientifically as objectively as you can. So the last thing is really to come out with a lifetime strategy. So again, there's another alliteration I didn't plan. You had sustainability, you had the scientific method, and now you have strategy. So three S's there. Strategy simply means that throughout this entire process, we've had clients who've lost 150, 200 pounds. We've had clients who just lose 10 or 20 pounds. We have clients who even want to gain weight if that's their problem with metabolism and body type and so forth, where they just can't gain weight. I know most people don't want to hear that, but that happens. Not to most of us, but nutrition is a continuum. We are all on this thing, not as individual groups, but very specific points on this metabolic continuum. So strategy for different people can mean totally different things. Your strategy might be, okay, these are the triggers that have made me regain weight in the past. I've always fallen back into my old habits, or I've always done this, or I never learned this. I just followed a very rigid, inflexible diet, and that's what hurt me over here. So we're gathering a lot of new knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of objective data about your body, about nutrition, about physiology, but we still have to, at the end of the day, apply it to what you're going to do once you've met your goal. And so that's a really key transition. And if you've done things where you start with a high amount of structure, you move to increasing flexibility, you should discover you don't have to do a lot different. You've been eating the food you like, you've been eating in restaurants, you've been monitoring things, you've got a lot of data that you now know about your body. So now it's just a matter of, I've been in this calorie deficit, how much food can I eat? And now I'm at maintenance levels. You know, for me, a strategy is, I'm into this for my health more than anything. I mean, at least I think, a strong part. And so, I've never been just about being a pro bodybuilder and being big, strong, athletic, etc. That's always fun. But I've always thought as a little kid, because I started out as a very unhealthy child, kind of overweight, wasn't living the life I wanted to live. Even as a teenager, I became that self-aware. And so I made those changes. I started lifting weights, eating better, and so forth. And a lot of it was for health. I got really excited about that. That's why in my education, I have one doctorate in nutrition, one in health education. I've got other master's degrees in teaching. And so those are things I like to do because it's just, to me, the right way to be responsible with your body, with your physique, with your health, and live the healthiest, happy life. So part of my strategy is to be healthy. So I'm not going to just eat a bunch of junk and say, well, if it fits my macros, that's okay. I'm eating all this crap. Not at all. I'm into this for quality, and even though I love ice cream and Reese peanut butter cups, as I'm known for, and all that stuff, I do it in small amounts, in a managed frequency, and so forth, because I really want good health. So for me, my long-term strategy is to eat in a way that's healthy and moderate, and maybe even slightly on the low side, so that by the time I get maybe to a weekend and I want to indulge, Valentine's Day, Super Bowl, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, summer barbecues, those kind of things, I don't want to go to those events and then just sit there and not eat. I'm going to eat. So I need to make sure that during my week or my normal routine, I'm eating pretty clean, pretty healthy, maybe slightly under. My training is staying up there. That's my strategy. That's my strategy. You guys might come up with something else. A lot of people love to track food like accountants for the rest of their lives. That would kill me. I don't want to be that obsessive when it comes to food. But I learned it, I can apply it, and now I can do my best just in my head without it. But just like right now, I can come back to tracking and use those tools over and over again once I've learned them. Now I am trying to make some specific changes in my health or my physique, so I can go back to using those. That's my long-term strategy. So here's the deal, guys. I went through structured flexibility, how to move from high structure to increasing flexibility. We're using knowledge of metabolism and our personal body types. I talked about metabolic positioning, and I've got tons of articles on our website. You can go to thedietdoc.com and get tons of information. I talked about meal planning and how that can even be a strategic difference in what you do so it fits you. And that transitions us into flexibility, where we talk about sustainability and how important it is to make sure you're doing something that you can sustain. And then the scientific method, it's all about that objective, accurate information, so that once you've learned it, it's like riding a bike. You never have to do the same thing. You've done the hard work already. You just know it intuitively. Finally having that lasting strategy. So here at the Diet Doc, we've been busy doing this stuff with clients for 20 to 25 years. Now we have owners, program owners around the world doing this. And we're opening up some new channels of information. We've got some really cool apps that you're getting some information on, some links through this video here, some of the graphics. And we want to make it easier for you to get this information. We know that ultimately you might end up working with somebody one-on-one. You don't have to make those kind of decisions now. We're a do-it-yourself culture, right? The first thing we do when we want to figure something out is we pull out our phone and we Google it and see how to do that kind of thing. So I understand that. And that's why we want to put these videos in your hands. There are some things you can do with this information. You can use our free macro calculator. We created the Macro Doc so that you can figure out your food intake. I've created this algorithm. I talked about that in the beginning. I told you there are some of these models out there, some things that have existed. Well, we've created our own. I sat down, looked through 100 years of research on metabolism, came up with what I think are the exact best metrics for most people. We do live on that bell curve, like I said. We are on a continuum, so there are ways to fine-tune and manage that. But you can use our free calculator, the Macro Doc, to figure out exactly what your metabolism requires. Then there are going to be some ways that you can get some help with some meal planning. I want to make sure you understand that if you like this kind of information, if this is something that you think you really want to dive deeper into, we're going to create some tutorial packages. So by the time you see this, they will probably be available where for a really discounted amount, you can jump on board and say, man, I want a month of coaching with Joe personally, and we can go through that. And I want you to meet my business partner here soon, Dr. Corey Probst. She not only has a background in physiology as well, but she has a PhD in health psychology. So she can help with some of those behavioral tools that will help make this all come together. So just tons of cool stuff. I told you guys I was going to stop at 30 minutes, and I've got 20 seconds left. So I want to thank you for watching this. Just keep your eyes open for some of these things that we're going to keep throwing at you. And I really hope you can take this and live your absolute best life, guys. That's what it's all about. So thank you, guys, and we'll catch you another time.